For 10 years, my professor husband, Daniel Whitmore, and I loved each other deeply, treating each other with respect and care. Our only regret was that he had a zoospermia, so we were never able to have a child. Then, on our 10th wedding anniversary, the housekeeper, Megan Wright, suddenly claimed she was pregnant with Daniel's child. I thought she was joking. 2 days later, she threw a paternity test result in my face. Test proved that the child she was carrying was Daniel's. Megan sued us. On the day of the hearing, she cried in front of the courthouse, telling the media how Daniel had molested her. She said we were a pair of perverts who treated her like a breeding machine and kept her confined in our home. Daniel and I couldn't defend ourselves at all. The netizens labeled us as demon employers and nailed us to a pillar of shame. Daniel lost his job at the university, and his students were ashamed of him. I was fired from my company that same day. In the end, Daniel couldn't withstand the pressure of public opinion and committed suicide in prison. I became a rat on the streets to down and beaten by nettles. Driven insane, I wandered into traffic and died miserably in the middle of the road. Even at death, I couldn't understand how Megan had become pregnant with a child of my husband, who had a zoospermia. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn to the day before. Megan claimed she was pregnant with Daniel's child. "Ma'am, it's yours and Sir's 10th wedding anniversary tomorrow. Are you celebrating at home or going out?" The familiar voice sounded beside my ear. I snapped my eyes open. A plain, honest-looking face filled my vision. Megan Wright bent slightly at the waist, smiling warmly at me. At that moment, my heart was pounding violently, like a heavy drum striking my chest. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to suppress the surge of emotion inside me. With effort, I tugged at the corner of my mouth and barely managed to smile. "Tomorrow we're going out to eat. You don't need to worry about anything." Megan seemed very satisfied with my answer.
Alright, Mom.
"Then I'll go organize the walk-in closet." I nodded, watching her retreating figure as she walked away, my thoughts sinking into deep contemplation. At this very moment, I was absolutely certain of one thing. I, Vivian Whitmore, had been reborn. Thinking about what Megan had just said, I picked up my phone and checked the date. It was May 17th, the last peaceful day of my life. Almost at the same time, I logged into my social media account. I had a few dozen followers and barely any comments. At glance, it looked like nothing more than an ordinary account. However, I knew that if events followed the trajectory of my previous life, by this time tomorrow, my social media would become a battlefield of cyber violence. Evil employers. How can someone like this actually be a professor? He should be dragged out and executed. The man is a rapist, and the woman isn't any better. Rotten trash. Go to hell, you disgusting thing. A disgrace to women. If I were you, I'd kill myself right now to atone. Are you that vile you can't have children? So you harm other women? Are you even human? Those comments were like sharp knives, carving into me until I was flayed alive. The thought of it. I immediately deleted everything on the account and then deactivated it entirely. Then another thought surfaced. What difference would that make? What was coming would still come. Even though I had been reborn. Tomorrow, Megan would still go online under her real name and accuse Daniel of raping her. And more than that, what exactly was going on with the child in her belly?
No.
No matter what, since heaven had given me a second chance at life, I absolutely could not allow the tragedy of my previous life to repeat itself. I returned to the bedroom and began ordering small home surveillance cameras online. In my previous life, when Megan first came to work in our home as a housekeeper, I had wanted to install cameras, but Daniel felt it would be disrespectful to someone living under our roof. Thinking back on it now, it was precisely because of our kindness that we had walked step by step into her trap. The question that had played to me, the one I couldn't grasp even as I died, suddenly returned despite all my careful preparations. How could the child she was carrying be Daniel's? After we got married, Daniel and I started trying for a baby. But no matter how long we tried, I never got pregnant. It was only after going to the hospital for tests that we learned he had a zoospermia. The doctor had been blunt. Daniel could not have children at all. Even IVF had no chance of success. He felt deeply guilty toward me and wanted a divorce. Nevertheless, over all those years, our relationship had been good. We had never even had a real argument. I refused to divorce him. After all, life is long, and the one who stays by your side is your partner, not a child. That was why when Megan reported him online in my previous life, I did not take it seriously. Daniel felt the same way. He believed he had done nothing wrong, and even turned around to comfort me, telling me not to be angry. We thought she had gone crazy trying to extort money. Who would have thought that she would swear over and over again that the child was his? She even went to do a paternity test. When the results came out, both Daniel and I were stunned. The child's biological father was Daniel. With such powerful evidence placed in front of everyone, the police came directly to our home and in full view of the public, handcuffed him and took him away just like that. Daniel was sued and taken to court. On the day of the trial, Meghan invited dozens of media reporters and online influencers. The judge ruled that Daniel was guilty of rape and sentenced him to 7 years in prison. After the verdict, she stood outside the courthouse, crying bitterly in front of the cameras. I always believe that bad people would never escape the punishment of the law. Thank you all for supporting me. I will continue living no matter what. That was not all. She publicly played the victim even harder, tearfully recounting her suffering to the reporters. She claimed, "We were a perverted couple who treated her like a breeding machine, beat her, and kept her confined in our home." Daniel was left utterly defenseless and sent to prison. As the wife who had helped evil thrive, I was also swallowed by online abuse. People blocked our front door and poured filth there every day. I received death threats. Daniel was expelled from the university overnight, becoming a symbol of hypocrisy in a suit and tie. His students were ashamed of him. On the very day the verdict was announced, I was fired from my company. I was even forced to give up the home I had lived in for 10 years, as compensation to her. In the end, I also met a miserable death in the street, with no one coming to my aid. When I recalled the agony and despair I felt just before dying, in my previous life, my entire body still trembled as if I had fallen into an icy abyss. Sometimes I even wondered if she had stolen a used condom from Daniel and used it for IVF. But that was impossible, because even the doctor had said Daniel had a zoospermia. The odds of success were slim even with IVF. Furthermore, it was not as though we had never tried. Over the years, every attempt had ended in failure. At dinner, Meghan bustled in and out of the kitchen. I watched her carefully. This middle-aged, thick-set woman weighed over 300 pounds. Even if she were pregnant, it was impossible to tell. Daniel was away on a business trip attending an academic conference. I did not come home that day. Taking advantage of the empty house, I went online and found a very well-known private investigator,
Marco Ale.
I asked him to look into her background. Facing the battle ahead, I needed to gather every piece of evidence that could work in my favor. The cameras were installed overnight. Aside from the bathroom and my bedroom, there were no blind spots. Marco was efficient as well. He promised to uncover her background within a week. With everything set, I lay restlessly in bed waiting for May 18th to arrive. It was the day that had condemned me to eternal ruin. In my previous life, I did not sleep at all. When I got up in the morning, the woman who stared back at me in the mirror had 2 deep, dark circles under her eyes. Meghan was not a live-in housekeeper. She usually arrived around 9 in the morning. In my previous life, on this very day, I had left early to go to the airport to pick Daniel up. Today, I followed the same path as before. Before heading out, I even gave Meghan a call. "We won't be home at all today. You don't need to cook lunch or dinner. Just clean up." On the other end of the line, she sounded gentle and respectful, completely different from the woman who would later cry in front of the courthouse. I told Daniel to go straight to the university after landing and not come home. I did not go to the airport either. Instead, I turned and walked into a cafe. Once inside, I took a seat in the corner, pulled out my tablet, and connected to the home surveillance feed. Today was my only chance to catch her slipping, and I did not dare miss a single second. Meghan arrived right on time at 9. As usual, she began by cleaning the house up. Until noon, everything looked normal. Just as disappointment began to creep in, she suddenly strode straight into my bedroom under the camera. When she came back out, she was wearing my silk sleepwear. She had also put on my jewelry around her neck and on her hands. She sat on the sofa elegantly lifting a glass of red wine, every bit the mistress of the house. At that moment, the doorbell rang. She rose unhurriedly and went to open the door. A young woman walked in. When I saw her face clearly, I nearly dropped the coffee cup in my hand. The person who had come to my home was Daniel's prize student, Sophie Ward. The diligent, hardworking student that Daniel often praised was now clinging affectionately to Meghan's arm. "Mom, you really do look like some kind of rich lady wearing that." She took out a bottle of cold pressed juice and pulled her to sit on the sofa. When Sophie saw the red wine on the coffee table, she frowned.
"Mom, why?"
"Why are you still drinking red wine? If someone finds out, they'll start questioning the pregnancy. What are you worried about? The child isn't going to be born anyway. Once the paternity test is done, the task is complete." As she spoke, she took another small sip of wine and casually poured a glass for Sophie. "Sophie, after today, it's all going to be brighter days ahead. This house will be ours sooner or later." Sophie glanced around the room. Greed flickered briefly in her eyes. After scheming for so long, This is the day we have been waiting for so long, Mom. This afternoon, just follow the plan and post everything online. I've already hired paid commenters. By tomorrow, the two of them will be completely ruined. Megan laughed even more brightly, placing a hand over her lower abdomen. You really are a clever one to have come up with a trick like this. Now that no explanation would ever clear that professor's name. Mom, you still need to be careful. Remember, after the paternity test, you must immediately go and deal with that thing. Otherwise, the two of us will. Sophie leaned close to her ear, whispering, was this the truth behind the pregnancy? I hurriedly turned the volume in my earpiece, all the way up. Megan patted Sophie's shoulder, brimming with confidence. Don't worry. I've been very careful. I definitely won't slip up once the test results come out. I'll go take care of what I prepared. I pressed the earbuds so hard against my ear canal it hurt. On the screen, Sophie was leaning back, her youthful face twisted into a sneer that looked grotesque on someone Daniel had mentored with such pride. The sample, Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. I swapped the labels in the university lab archive 2 days ago. I took a sample from a paternity case that tested positive and slapped Professor Whitmore's name on it. By the time anyone thinks to retest, Mom, you'll have miscarried due to stress. There won't be a fetus to test. My blood ran cold, then hot. So that was it. In my previous life, there was no child. There was never a child. The paternity test that nailed Daniel to the pillar of shame was a fabrication born of Sophie's access to the university archives. They relied on the chaos of public opinion to prevent a second, independent test. By the time Daniel was in prison, Megan would have staged a miscarriage, destroying the evidence, leaving only the forged paper trail and a ruined man. I watched Megan swirl the red wine in her glass. And the belly? High-grade silicone, Sophie laughed, tapping her mother's stomach. Strap it on tight tomorrow. And stop eating so much. You're naturally fat, but we need the shape to look firm, not flabby. I had seen enough. I stopped the recording and uploaded it immediately to 3 separate encrypted cloud servers. Then I called Marco Hale. I have the footage, I said, my voice trembling not with fear, but with adrenaline. But I need more. Sophie mentioned gambling debts. Find them. And I need a doctor, a forensic gynecologist who isn't afraid of a live broadcast. Consider it done, Marco replied. But Mrs. Whitmore, if they post that accusation tomorrow, the mob won't care about facts initially. It's going to get ugly. I know, I said, staring at my reflection in the dark cafe window. I'm counting on it. I intercepted Daniel at the airport. When he walked out of the arrival gate, looking tired but handsome in his trench coat, I felt a sob lodge in my throat. He rushed over, concern etching his brow. Vivian? What are you doing here? You look pale. I pulled him into the back seat of our car and told the driver to drive aimlessly. I couldn't risk going home yet. Daniel, I said, taking his hands. They were warm.
Real.
I need you to listen to me, and I need you not to panic. Our lives are about to be set on fire. I showed him the video. I watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally, a profound, shattering hurt. He recognized Sophie immediately, the student he had written recommendation letters for, the girl he had helped get a scholarship. Why, he whispered, his voice cracking. I treated her like a daughter. Because they are predators, Daniel. And we are the prey. I cupped his face. In another life, I let them destroy us. I let you die. Not this time. But I need you to be strong. Tomorrow, they will accuse you of rape. They will accuse you of impregnating her. But I have azoospermia, he stammered. It's medically impossible. The mob doesn't care about medicine. They care about a story. We have to give them a better one. I leaned in close, my eyes locking with his. We're going to play along. We're going to let them think they've won. And when they step onto the stage, we're going to drop the curtain on them. May 18th, the day of our destruction. Megan arrived at 9 a.m., wearing a baggy sweater and a face full of tragic resolve. I sat at the dining table, drinking coffee, watching her. Ma'am, she said, her voice trembling, an Oscar-worthy performance. I have something to tell you. It's about Sir.
Oh.
I set my cup down. Where is the cleaning spray, Megan? The counter is sticky. She blinked, thrown off by my indifference. She took a deep breath and fell to her knees.
Mom, I'm pregnant.
It's Professor Whitmore's. He forced me. I looked at her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply picked up my phone. Is that so? I asked calmly. Megan froze. This wasn't the script. I was supposed to scream, to hit her, to drive her out so she could run to the waiting cameras. You don't believe me? She wailed, raising her voice. I have proof. I'm 3 months along. He came into my room at night. He threatened to fire me if I didn't submit. Okay, I said. Okay. She stared at me, her mouth agape. If it's Daniel's, we'll support it. I lied smoothly. But Megan, you know Daniel is sterile. We have medical records. Doctors make mistakes, she shrieked, scrambling up. I'm going to the media. You heartless woman. You knew. You let him use me. She ran out the door.
I checked the time. 9:15 a.m.
By 9:30 a.m., the live stream began. Sophie had set it up perfectly. Megan stood in front of the university gates, tears streaming down her face, a mob of reporters, alerted hours ago, already surrounding her. The hashtags began to trend immediately. Hashtag Professor Predator, hashtag Justice for Megan. My phone began to buzz incessantly. Hate mail, death threats, calls from my company's HR department. Daniel's dean called, demanding an explanation. I sent a single text to Daniel, who was waiting in a hotel room we had booked. Hold the line. Let it simmer. We waited 6 hours. By 4 p.m., the internet was a bloodbath. Photos of Daniel were being burned. People were doxing our address. They were calling for castration. The narrative was set. The elite, wealthy professor preying on the poor, helpless housekeeper. It was time. I posted a single link on my social media account, which was currently being flooded with millions of hate comments. The caption read, "Live response from the Whitmore residence. The truth." I opened the door to the reporters camped on my lawn. "Come in," I said. "All of you." They stampeded in like wolves, cameras rolling. In the living room, Megan, who had returned to pack her things, and Sophie were hugging on the sofa, looking terrified and vindicated. "You have some nerve," Sophie shouted at me for the cameras. "Admit what your husband did." Daniel walked in from the hallway. The room went silent. He looked calm, cold, and scholarly. "I am here," Daniel said, his voice steady. "And I have brought a guest." A woman in a white coat entered.
Dr.
Eris, the city's most feared forensic gynecologist, followed by 2 police officers and Marco, my private investigator. "You claim to be pregnant with my child," Daniel said to Megan. "I am," Megan screamed, clutching her belly. "He's trying to intimidate me." "Great," I said, stepping into the frame of the live stream. "Then you won't mind a checkup right now. Dr. Eris is independent. The police are here to witness it. If you are pregnant, we will sign over half our assets to you immediately. We have the papers drawn up right here." I threw a legal document on the table. The cameras zoomed in. It was a legitimate deed of transfer. Greed flickered in Megan's eyes, warring with panic. Sophie stepped in. "This is a violation of her rights. The stress could kill the baby." "No stress," Dr. Eris said, snapping on latex gloves. "I have a portable ultrasound machine. It takes 30 seconds. Unless there is no baby." The chat on the live stream was going wild. "Why are they refusing? Just do the test. Half the assets?" "Do it, Mom," Sophie hissed, too low for the mics but loud enough for me. She assumed the silicone belly would fool a visual check, and she could claim the ultrasound machine was tampered with later. Megan lay back on the sofa. She pulled up her shirt. The belly was there, round and protruding. "See," Sophie sneered. "Monster." Dr. Eris didn't blink. She applied the gel. She placed the wand on the stomach. The monitor, connected to the large TV in the living room, flickered to life. Static. Empty, gray static.
No heartbeat. No sac. No fetus.
Just a dense, uniform shadow. "That's odd," Dr. Eris said dryly. "Human tissue doesn't absorb sound waves like this. Rubber does, though." Before Sophie could intervene, Dr. Eris reached out and, with a sudden, violent tug, pulled at the skin of Megan's stomach. It peeled away. The room erupted. Megan shrieked, trying to cover herself, but the belly, a high-quality silicone prosthetic, was dangling from her waist. Underneath, her real stomach was flabby and pale, marked with stretch marks from decades ago, but undeniably flat. The cameras flashed like lightning. "It seems," Daniel said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "that I have not only been cured of azoospermia, but I have also impregnated a piece of plastic." "This is a setup," Sophie screamed, lunging for the camera. "They planted it on her." "Sit down," Marco barked, blocking her path. He connected his tablet to the TV, replacing the ultrasound feed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the camera directly. "Since we are sharing truths, let's look at the paternity test you were planning to release." The video from the hidden camera played. Sophie's face filled the screen. I swapped the labels. I took a sample from a paternity case that tested positive. The silence in the room was absolute. The reporters looked from the screen to Sophie, who had turned the color of ash. "Sophie Ward," Daniel said, looking at his student with pity that hurt more than anger. "I taught you ethics. I taught you biology. I did not teach you how to forge federal documents." "And the motive?" I asked. Marco swiped the screen. Bank records appeared. Megan Wright, $80,000 in gambling debt to loan sharks. Sophie Ward, $40,000 in credit card debt for luxury goods. You didn't want justice, I said. You wanted a settlement. You wanted to destroy a good man's life to pay for your blackjack habit and designer bags. The police officers stepped forward. Megan Wright, Sophie Ward. You are under arrest for attempted extortion, fraud, and falsification of evidence. As the handcuffs clicked onto Sophie's wrists, she looked at Daniel. Professor, please. I was forced. It was my mom. She made me. Megan screamed. You lying little brat. It was your idea. You said he was weak. You said his wife was stupid. They turned on each other, screaming obscenities, dragging each other down into the filth they had created. The internet is a fickle beast. The same people who had told Daniel to kill himself at 10 a.m. were worshipping him as a martyr by 6 p.m. The university issued a public apology within the hour. My company begged me to return. We ignored them all. Daniel and I sat on the porch that night. The police had cleared the lawn. The silence was heavy, but peaceful. We did it, Daniel said softly. He looked at me, and I saw the shadow of the man who had committed suicide in my past life fading away, replaced by a survivor. How did you know, Vivian? How did you know to install the cameras? How were you so ready? I hesitated. I could tell him about the rebirth, about the pain of dying on the street, about the years of watching his memory get dragged through the mud. But looking at him now, alive and safe, I realized the past didn't matter. I just paid attention, I whispered, leaning my head on his shoulder. And I decided that kindness without armor is just naivety. I wasn't going to let anyone hurt you. Not ever again. 3 years later, the scandal of the silicone pregnancy became a case study in media ethics and law schools across the country. Sophie Ward was sentenced to 5 years for fraud and forgery. Her academic career was obliterated. Megan died in prison of a stroke a year into her sentence. The stress of withdrawal from her gambling addiction and the rage at her daughter took her out. Daniel and I never had children. We didn't need to. We started a foundation for victims of cyberbullying and false accusations. We traveled. We loved. We lived the 10 years I had lost in the darkness of my previous life. On our 13th anniversary, I woke up to the sun streaming through the window. Daniel was already up, making coffee. The nightmare was a distant memory, a story from another life. I walked into the kitchen, and he smiled, that same gentle, honest smile that I had crossed the boundaries of death to save. Happy anniversary, Vivian, he said. Happy anniversary, Daniel, I replied. The camera was off. The audience was gone. But this quiet, boring, beautiful morning was the only victory that mattered.